Hello, I'm Ian Scales, you're watching TelecomTV, and I'm joined by Andrew Yeomans, who is an architect, or was an architect, at the Lloyds Banking Group, and he's now more or less freelancing, aren't you, Andrew?
Yes, sir.
That's
right.
So we're going to be talking about security, because that was Andrew's big specialisation. And his background is in banking, as I said before. And I'm guessing that you take a similar attitude to Billy Connolly, who said, there's no such thing as bad weather, just inappropriate clothing. A similar thing could be applied to security, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that's true. Security has been a bit of a challenging subject over my time in the industry, and I think one of the big challenges has been that people don't bother to do their research on what went wrong in the past. Every generation has to rediscover the faults again, so that they never fix things for the root cause. Instead, keep on perpetrating things. So we still end up with password rules that were 20 years out of date 20 years ago, and wonder why it doesn't work.
Yes.
One of the reasons I actually moved into an architecture position was I think there was an opportunity to influence the direction at the design point of view, and it's much easier if we can fix problems at the design rather than try to retrofit security later.
Yes. Okay, so I mean, obviously at the moment there's quite a frenzy over IoT security. People have suddenly worked out that there's a huge set of vulnerabilities involved if we send all of these devices out into the environment without the proper safeguards attached to them. As far as the threat landscape at the moment, do you think it's being overdone, or do you think that there is a large challenge out there?
I see one of the challenges is the complexity of the environment. It actually brings back memories of what it was at the start of my career when microprocessors were only just coming in. IBM PC hadn't quite been invented then, but there was a whole range of different flavours of devices, all sort of named after fruits like your tangerines, not just apples. But standards hadn't been set. People were using different communication sets. You had your acoustic couplers, current loop devices, RS-232 with a wide variety of cables. No one had a standard way of doing things, therefore people were reinventing it all the time. And I think we're in exactly the same position right now with IoTs. There aren't standards of the communications, there aren't standard practices and standard operating systems yet. And so the complexity of the whole environment is so wide. So it never is the case of saying IoT security. There's actually IoT type 1 security, type 2, and in different contexts.
Is that a case of where we're at with IoT though? In other words, it has to go through this fragmented stage because we don't know where it's going to end up yet.
I think it will, yeah. There will be consolidation in the industry, and people will come to work around a few different standard architectures and device types. It might take 5 years, maybe a bit longer than that even, before it really settles down. Hopefully they'll settle down the architectures which actually do have security designed into them, but there is that frightful risk that people might not learn from experience.
So how do you see the threat landscape at the moment? Is it critical?
Depends on the threat to whom. The information security community, if you look at blogs, they tend to be concentrating on a couple of threats. One of them is the threat to the whole world of using IoT devices which are inadequately secured and can be compromised, and therefore can be used for denial of service attacks against anyone in the world, whether you use IoTs or not. The second threat they're looking at is the sort of confidentiality threat. Can they be used as spying devices within your home? Is that toy internet-connected doll actually monitoring all your conversations? Is your television or is your Alexa or Siri device also monitoring all your conversations all the time?
Yes, which it is.
Which it is, of course. And is that the level of trust that we're given in our devices actually, are they sufficiently trustworthy to be to be used? So
there is a fairly broad landscape of threats, though, isn't it? Right from the motivated criminal through to almost stumbling into it by accident. That we end up with this huge set of vulnerabilities around something like Alexa recording everything. Yeah. Well, it has to keep its ears open to listen for when you call out for Alexa, doesn't it?
Certainly, but trying to analyse what the real risks are and are they likely to impact us. I mean, the security industry has tended to be up to now very much control-based. So we have our checklists on what controls are being put in place, rather than really thinking about, do we actually need to put controls in these areas, or is someone likely to track this or not? Now, that is something which has been changing, because the cost of attacks has really been going down dramatically. I mean, yes, a long while ago it would be possible, in principle, to do denial of service attacks, but the actual cost of setting up the computers and networks and getting them connected would have been prohibitive unless you were a nation state. Nowadays, you can rent some criminal gang who's already compromised devices and for a few dollars.
Really?
Or you can buy your cloud computing, and before that, one of the cloud computing companies, well, they will try to detect it and kick you off, but before they've done that, you can still do your denial of service if you've got that criminal bent.
So there's a kind of scale-out effect which is happening on the behalf of the hackers as well.
Yeah, and the actual devices themselves are becoming so much more intelligent and complex, whereas for just a few pounds you can buy computer devices which have the same power as the old Cray supercomputers in the past.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, what's the solution really? We're looking at that, it sounds almost intractable, but presumably there are things like AI that were going to help you automate the network to a certain extent so that it can intercept these things?
I think it might. It can start to detect attacks, but a challenge of that is actually working out which attacks are going to be effective in your organisation and which ones, they're just an attack, it's just noise. There's an awful lot of people out there doing the IT version of rattling the car doors to see if anything is open, and most of the time doors are all locked and you're safe. And if you have systems which just detect attacks, that isn't going to be very helpful. I mean, as a security guy, I really don't want another system deployed which yet reports more potential attacks. I want to know which ones are actually getting through, and I have to do something about, not the ones that I've stopped.
So yeah, well, you don't want to know about things that aren't really going to impact the system. You don't want to know about, how do you approach the problem in that case?
Well, security by design is a good starting point to try to architect problems out of your environment completely. So if you aren't physically connected to the rest of the world, then it makes it very hard to get physical level attacks. I know there may be some obscure ways of doing it at times, Stuxnet being one of the examples where you might be able to bridge air gaps, but by and large you remove an awful lot of network-based attacks if you didn't have to be connected. You can also reduce some of the other attack-based ones, the environmental issues or other problems. For example, if you've got cloud-connected services where all the intelligence is in the cloud service, you've got many components which all have to be working together to keep things going. If any one of those fails, then the whole thing can fail. Designing a system where there's local intelligence which will take over and run in the absence of cloud services makes a lot of sense in those cases.
Okay.
So understanding what you've got to lose if something goes wrong, is it likely to go wrong, are there remedies that you can take? Those are the questions which almost any sort of computing device deployment, you should be asking those. Yes. And checking it out.
You see signs that people aren't asking that?
No. And up to a point, if you're just experimenting with an idea, before you've got to the point of depending on it, then it's understandable not to get all those questions answered. But it's going to bite you very quickly if that idea gets taken over. I mean, I've seen computer systems where the senior management they saw the demo and said, "Let's sell that."
Yeah.
Without doing the 2 years of engineering which needed to actually fix the issues. Yes. Then, of course, in IoT devices, particularly if you've sold millions of them, it can be bankrupting it can bankrupt the company to actually have to fix those sort of things.
That's right. Recall costs a lot of money. Anyway, well, look, thank you very much, Andrew. That's great.
Thank you.